Studios.
Okay, before we get started, I want to tell you about something a little different we're doing this week. Now, this is a big milestone for Roots and Shadows, the Real Appalachia Podcast. Well, it's our very first interview and our very first video podcast. Now, a few weeks ago, I had the chance to sit down with Danny G and talk about one of Appalachia's most fascinating UFO cases. We ended up having such a great conversation that there was no way I could fit it all into one episode without leaving out some really important things and really good parts. So instead of rushing through it, I've decided to split it into 2 episodes. Now you're listening to part 1 today, and part 2 will be released next Saturday, which will be, well, I won't be on vacation, so it's kind of working out here. So I'll be working on some material as well. But if you'd rather watch the conversation, you can find the full video on Spotify, or you can see it on our YouTube channel, Roots and Shadows Podcast. So now, if you're like a lot of our listeners and you prefer just to sit back and enjoy and listen, well, you're in the right place too, because you can do that as well. So Saturday after that, when Roots and Shadows returns on our regular schedule, we're going to have an all-new true crime story from Appalachia. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. So let's get started with this week's episode. Okay, well, this is Roots and Shadows, the Real Appalachia Podcast, and we're coming to you today, well, on location, and we've got a special guest with us. Before we get into that, though, this is our first ever video podcast, and we're excited about that, and we're going to have a lucky guest here. But a few weeks ago, we did an episode on Roots and Shadows, and we went to Wytheville, Virginia, is where it took us. Now, the title of the episode was UFOs in Appalachia, and it was dealing with the UFO sightings in Wytheville in 1987. And when I was preparing for that episode, I was reviewing reports from old-time newspapers from the 80s, old articles, and I even spent some time driving around the town of Wytheville and Wythe County at night looking for things. And everywhere I went and started interacting with people, and I'd ask questions, the locals, I would say, well, can you tell me anything about this? And they kept telling me, this one name kept popping up. They said, you need to talk to Danny G. And I was like, okay. And then I would go to the next person and I'd say, hey, can you give me a story about what went on up here in Wytheville in 1987? Now, this was episode 18 that we did on Roots and Shadows, so it's been a few weeks ago. But as I was going around, it always kept pointing back to this same man, Danny G. So I thought, I've got to find this man. So I did. I got in touch with Danny G, and we've got him today. So we appreciate you, Danny G, being involved with the Roots and Shadows and taking the time out of your day.
Well, thank you for asking.
Yes, sir. It's been a journey to get here, and you're a busy man, and that's great to be busy in this day and time. So I'd like to spend some time, Dan, if it's okay with you, to kind of look back over the last 40 years with what went on here at Wytheville and the things that went on with this UFO sightings. But before we get into that, do you want to tell us a little about who Danny G is?
Well, I'm a native son, grew up here, played football at George Wythe, went to Wytheville Community College, have a degree in business management. And for some reason, when I left college up here with a degree in business management, they saw me as a writer because I've been writing for the Collegian, the college newspaper. And so a friend of mine I knew at the local newspaper, the Southwest Virginia Enterprise, offered me a job probably a week after graduation. And I said, sounds like something I'd like to try. So I went to work for them and as the sports and news director, and wore a lot of hats. Actually got to put the paper together.
Okay.
Back before the computers and all in the 80s, we had papers that you cut and glued and put on the page. And that was a learning experience. And of course, I had a paper to fill. So I learned very quickly that I had to stash a few stories back that weren't so timely, just in case they need them, because the boss would come and say, Danny, I got this much to fill on the front page. What do you got? And so I liked that, and it got me back into doing photography. And so I shot a lot of pictures and won a couple awards, and decided that everything was hunky-dory, and then I came up to the radio station to do an interview about baseball then, because I was leading a group to get professional minor league baseball back to Wytheville. And some people said I was crazy, and that's kind of spurs me on more. But working with the town's mayor then, the judge, and a few other people, after 13 years, I was able to get baseball back to Wytheville.
Oh, wow.
And we had the Cubs here in the Appalachian League. Had a really good first year. And I always find something to keep me busy. And so I decided that I'd spend enough time on baseball, let somebody else do it. At the time, I was doing the announcing at the ball game for the public address, and my brother was the scorekeeper. And so we had a pretty good thing going on, and then he got another job, and I came up here to do the interview about the baseball team, and they liked my voice and said, "How about coming to work for us?" And growing up, I used to listen to Dizzy Dean and Phil Rizzuto and all those guys on TV, doing in the black and white TV era. And I used to run around with a microphone and play like when I was a kid, like being them. But I never thought I would get a chance. So here it is, radio. And they have never had a full-time news director or a full-time sports director. So I said, sounds good to me. So I took on the job in 1984 when my wife was pregnant with my daughter. And that was a tough time to be moving, if you can imagine jobs.
Yeah, no doubt.
Fortunately, she had her insurance as her company. But we moved. I moved to this job in November of 84, and in December 10th of 84, my daughter was born. So for years, the only thing she knew about her dad was he worked at the radio station. And as time grew, she has worked for me, with me. She's run the board. She has done ball games when I had to do 2 a night.
Yeah.
And little brother who's done radio, he and I have done games together. But it's been a family affair until now. But even now, if I needed her, she'd find a way to help me because she knows the aspects. In fact, the guy that does our football broadcast runs a board. She and her husband taught him.
Okay.
And he's the guy we've had for years now. So I like the family thing. And like I was telling you earlier, and little Josh, my 8-year-old grandson, he's done, but he'd done a couple promos for me, but he's done the show with me, and we've talked about school, and he's an athlete, so we talk about sports and all. But it's nice to have,
Yeah. I mean, kind of like me, they can't see it, but behind the camera there's my daughter. She came with me today, and it's.
I'm sorry, but she's prettier than you are.
Well, I think I don't know about that, Danny.
No, I tried.
But no, I know what you mean by having your family involved, because she and I, we get to go out and we do some things together for my podcast, and my wife, everybody, we kind of do it as a family thing. She's home from college. She's a journalism major, so this summer we've been out doing things. But I know what you mean by having your family involved. It's
very important.
Yeah, it is. So, well, take us back to, speaking of the radio station, because that's where you were working when all this started back in 1987. You were the news director for the radio station, WIVE.
Yes.
The oldest radio station in Wythe County, if I'm not mistaken, right? 1949 when it first broadcast?
Yes, it's just a little bit younger than MEV and Marion.
Okay, good deal. So you're the news director, and I would imagine for those who don't know, in 1987, there was no social media. There was no internet.
This is true.
We got our news from the paper or the radio. That's how we got it. And I was like that. I was young, but I remember my parents, on every hour, the radio station would give a news blurb, and everybody would dial in to listen to what was going on. Mm-hmm. And that's how we got it. Or we read the newspaper. So you're the news director, very important job for a community. And but you would call, I guess. So tell us about, how did you get your news in 1980? How did you get the news to report?
If I needed something from state police, I'd call their guy who was a press guy. Then I'd call sheriff in Wythe County. If I needed something, the sheriff in Grayson County, I'd call him. all the way around. But it got to be where I called Sheriff Wayne Pike about every morning about the same time. What's happening, Sheriff? And he'd go down the list of crimes, arrests, and, general stuff. And then one day he said, Danny, I got something you might be interested in. I figure rape, robbery, we don't have much of that anyway. But he said several of my officers and one from the state police were in Fort Chiswell, and they saw some UFOs last night. And I figured, well, he's jiving old Danny. I said, what are you talking about? And then he said, no, I'm serious. And he said these were guys that had been in the military that had seen aircraft of all shapes and sizes. And they saw Fort Chiswell, and they said that it was not like anything they'd been around before. And at the same time, he'd had a couple from out of town driving down in the Graham's Forge area, and they said they had a UFO run them off the road. So those things together, of course, he didn't get their name or number, so I couldn't call them to get a first-hand story or nothing. But it kind of got my curiosity going. But then I said, it's probably helicopters, and I kind of pushed it off to the side. Well, then calls started coming in. I saw it. I see it right now, I have a friend who was a former airplane mechanic when he lived in Florida. And I told him, I said, I got to do something, see what's going on. I said, let's you and I go out looking. And so I took my 35 millimeter, and he took his VHS recorder. And we went in his truck and took a weapon with us, just in case. Well, I didn't know what we was going into,
Right, yeah.
And we went on Route 21 like you go toward Independence. And we had turned around at the crossroads out there and decided we hadn't seen nothing. And we admitted we took a fifth of Jim Beam with us, but we didn't even open it because, it was kind of frustrated not seeing anything. Then we crest the hill, and we looked to our left, and it's like what we call a mothership. It was as long as any ranch-style house in the area, and it was maybe a couple hundred feet off the ground. And this is a very rolling valley-type area. And while we were watching it, we got out of the vehicle and we were watching it, a red ball, spear, whatever you want to call it, came across the back of the ship and docked into the ship and disappeared.
Oh, wow.
So whole time we've got our camera sitting on the hood of the truck, and neither one touched them. Mesmerized.
Yeah.
It had windows. I couldn't see nothing in them, but there were windows in the craft, and it looked like something you would call a mothership because it was so big. Made no noise.
Yeah.
And just kind of glided like a balloon or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we watched it kind of fly over the knoll of the hill and disappear. No noise. And so that kind of got the whole thing going. The next day, I decided to have a live press conference. Forgot to tell my boss till it was too late. But we had a live UFO press conference in Southwest Virginia. This never happened. We had about 10 radio stations, 10 TV stations, about 4 radio stations, and several newspapers. And we packed in the studio, and the studio was a little bigger than this at the other place, but we packed it in, and we had so much electricity being drained, we kicked the breaker. But I had a guy who was former U.S. Navy and Naval Reserve, which had come in. We had a guy who was a photographer with RCA and whatever. There's in New York City, it's called Radio City Music Hall, I think, and he worked there. Mm-hmm. So he was here with his specialized camera. And we had a lady who had seen some things. So we put all them in a group to answer questions, and myself, of course, was there. And so we did a live hour-and-a-half press conference.
Wow.
And that seemed to
That's
get everybody.
impressive in 1987, right?
Oh, yeah. Uninterrupted, no commercials, no nothing. And my boss's eyes were about that big when he come in for work. But then when he realized what I'd done, I mean, it was historic.
Right.
A little station like us, it just wasn't something we would do or somebody our size would do. So from there, it just kind of mushroomed. Everybody in the world seemed to call, night and day. I had to wait till midnight to do my news for the next day because I was covered up answering the phone and trying to tape other people's sightings and all. But once we did that press conference live, they came out of the woodwork. Yeah. We had some of these people. There was several magazine-type shows that were on. I can't think of this one girl. I remember she stopped filming and had the guy help her fix her hair and makeup and all because it was a TV show.
Right, yeah.
I forget what the name of it was, but I couldn't believe she stopped taping to do that. But anyway, so I'm still trying to keep myself balanced and level, like I'm a newsman. I got to cover it as a news event.
Right, yeah.
But it's hard to cover it when you have sightings yourself. And see, before all was said and done, I had 51 sightings.
You personally?
Yes.
Wow.
And some I had one in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I had one along the interstate going to Radford one night, and I had one going to Galax. So it was mostly centered here, but there were other sightings.
Right.
And so when we got to the point where we were talking about a book, I was first person because I had seen all these things. And Paul Dillinger, who worked for the Roanoke Times, he and I were friends and worked in the same building. So I said, let's write a book. He wrote third person. I wrote first person, probably the first book like that I've ever seen. And we alternated chapters.
Yeah. So when I was working on this episode, which I actually titled it The Lights That Wouldn't Leave. That was what I titled this when I did it. I read that book. And before I wrote the episode, so I prepared myself, read your book, and I noticed how it was written. Like each chapter would go from one to the other. Mm-hmm. And it was very unique in how it did that. But something that stuck out to me in your book that you just talked about was how you described what you saw. And you in your book, you put it in very good detail. And I quoted you in the episode about how you described what you saw. And I got a message from one of our listeners after that episode went out, and she basically said, I'm so glad I found your podcast and heard that. She said, because I saw that same thing. She lives 2 counties away. She said, I saw that same thing in 1987, and she says, now I know I wasn't crazy. So for 40 years, that woman had lived with that. And when we described it, how you did in your book, she knew exactly what I was talking about. So I thought that was pretty cool that, almost 40 years later, she saw it, but I guess she was kind of apprehensive about saying anything because, people that had a stigma to it. People
asked me, said, are people calling you crazy? Do you think Denny was drunk or something? And because I'd won like every award in the state in news reporting, probably 5-6 years in a row. And I'd been around the business for a long time. This happened after I'd already been in the business a number of years. I didn't have that. If Danny says it, he saw it or,
Right.
And so I was fortunate. So they didn't point their finger and say, that's a crazy son of a gun, Yeah. They didn't do that. And that helped in my process. But you can imagine, I'm on the radio, people call me about these things. I'm seeing these things, but it's really not proper for me to report on what I saw.
Right.
It's totally misleading, and it's really in the business you don't do it. I got to tell about it when they invited me to Newport News, or Virginia Beach rather, where I spoke to all the major news broadcasters on the East Coast. And I didn't get a jive from them. I didn't get a joke. I mean, because they knew I put my reputation on the line with it, and I've covered a lot of stories, but this topped it. And because I was so involved with it, it added other things to it. You know, my house was broken into. They only stole the negative for the UFO pictures, nothing else. And I'd taken pictures for 6 years at the newspaper, and I had them in canisters, film canisters.
Right.
And they only took the one negative.
So I read that description in your book about those who they portrayed themselves as reporters when they were coming to talk to you. But you kind of in the book, you talk about how it seemed kind of strange how they went about that interview. And
well,
I'm not saying that's the ones who stole your negatives,
no,
but you had some visitors who come to your house that were.
I still believe it was stolen while I was in Virginia Beach speaking.
Okay.
See, that's when I got a phone call and then a card from a guy in Clifton Forge and said that he wanted to warn me that they would come after me or my family where I've been talking so much about it. And I said, I don't see why, I haven't said or pointed out nothing that's earth-shattering. And he said, well, I'll tell you, he lost his son to some form of cancer, and he blamed the government on that because he was open about his sighting and all. Mm-hmm. So he told me if he was that he would not go to Virginia Beach and do that speaking. And so I did. He did convince me. I left both my children at home. Wife and I went.
Well, it has to be unsettling. I mean, with everything going on, you get a phone call from someone who says,
and this guy
had to unsettle you some.
He didn't sound like a nutcase or nothing. And he said, they'll probably put something on your door handle of your car and poison you. And so,
Did you wear gloves?
Yes, sir. But as it occurred while I was there, they had a hepatitis situation at a Pizza Hut. I told my wife, if I'd eaten there and got hepatitis, they would have swore it was the government. So fortunately, I didn't go there. But also, a couple months after I got back from this event, my son was at a drunken party and got shot in the head. Lost all his eyesight. Fortunately, he didn't die. But the boys at the drunken party, the first thing they said was, men wearing black coats and ties and all did this. They blamed it on the men in black.
Oh, wow.
Which I really didn't think a lot about. Then the more I thought about it, well, if this is true, I've caused my own son to get blind. So I just dropped out of it altogether. I had been doing a monthly UFO newsletter, and everything that I knew, everybody else knew. And I had about 200 subscribers. And I stopped all communication with people about UFOs because it just didn't sit right with me that maybe I caused him to get shot. Mm-hmm. Later, we finally found one of the kids got drunk and admitted they used his head for Russian roulette. And apparently they were using each other's head for Russian roulette with a dummy shell before. Then after he passed out on the table at 9:30, they put a live shell in the 32, rolled it, and put it to his head, and it went off. Mm. And that's so tragic. He lived another 23 years, but he was blind the rest of his life. But so you can imagine, I'm thinking, that's my fault.
Oh, yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
And so I just totally, for several years, I wouldn't talk to nobody about UFOs.
What year was that?
That would have been in, 87, 88 would have been, I think 88's when I went to Virginia Beach, so it'd have been the early 90s or late 80s. Kind of all, I've got it.
But it was a couple years after all this had been going on. So.
And so it took me quite a while really to get over that. As you can imagine, he was my oldest child, and we were very close. But then after I'd heard some more information about the shooting, and I got talking to some other people. They convinced me. I did my first, I reckon, UFO conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. Right after that, I decided I'd go and do this one event. And it was pretty weird, but that's the thing about it. A lot of the people that are interested in UFOs and have had sightings or stuff are pretty weird, pretty far out there.
Yeah.
And
so how did you discern? I thought about that when I was working on this and reading your book. How did you discern? How did you decide what's somebody's just making stuff up, or maybe somebody's they're just way out there? I mean, how did you determine
it was
that?
hard because I'm a real down to earth guy. If you tell me something sour, I probably want to taste it.
Yeah, no, I get you.
But for example, this lady came here from Richmond. Her tag said, "I see UFO." So I said, "This lady's serious, And she said, "I've met you up there." And I said, "What are you talking about?" In the spaceship, "I've seen you up there." And I said, "Well, okay, I don't remember that." So, and she kept telling me that she could do a reading for me. This when it gets into the psychoanalyze, And I can tell you some things that's going to happen to you and already have happened to you that you don't remember, somebody hadn't told you. I said, all right. So she took me to her motel room. I said, first thing we're going to do is open the shade. Because, this is a strange woman, and I didn't have no witnesses. And so she took my watch and went into a trance, best I can tell. And she was talking in a guttural voice like it was a man or some kind of demon or something, and told me that I'd be in jail in the Colorado federal prison in the next 5 years. Well, fortunately, that didn't happen. But sitting there and she going through all this, and a lot of stuff she could have got out of the paper somewhere that happened to me that she...
Right, yeah.
So I said, I told myself, Danny, you got to do something to see if you can break this spell. So I said, what is the worst thing somebody can do in front of you? Pick your nose and eat it. So this is the truth. With this woman in this trance looking straight at me, I act like I picked the booger and put it in my mouth and ate it. She never faced her. I mean, she didn't know I was going to do it. I mean, I didn't hardly know I was going to do it, but it didn't faze her.
Wow. So you knew then that
something's going on there.
Right.
Well, I decided, I have to do better than that. So I hauled off and hit her on her knee. Whap. Because I figured at least knock her off her game,
Yeah, get her off balance or whatever. Make her
never
respond.
fazed her. I was afraid to go any further than that. I didn't want to get arrested because, so I figured if that hadn't got her attention, I wasn't going to try nothing else. And then she finally come out of her trance later on her own. And fortunately, I never saw that lady again. But because she was adamant that she had talked to me in a flying saucer up there, and I'm saying, lady, I don't think that happened. But one day I was at the other station, and a guy come to see me driving an old beat-up van. Introduced himself, and I said, what can I do for you? He said, well, I've been in contact with an alien for years. I said, okay. He said, this alien is going to record on a tape. I didn't know aliens use tapes, but anyway, was going to record me a tape and tell me what the truth of what life was all about. And I said, well, make me a copy. I'd like to hear it. He left, and I figured that's the last of that. 2 months, he come back. Hadn't got the tape yet. And I said, well, when you do come back to see me, you never come back again. But the interaction with those things was far more boggling than anything else, and that in the government, because they did a complete audit on my friend who had several businesses at the time, and on me, and I had a report from the FBI, and they redacted most of it when they sent me a copy. Oh. FBI. And apparently my brother got a full check in the military ranks because he was my brother. But I mean, those type of things, it's not normal.
Right.
The sightings are one thing, but when you got people, and then every now and then I get the occasional phone call, "You're dead, you son of a gun." I say, "Well, what are you talking about?" I said, "You've been running your mouth too much." Said there's a contract killer going to kill you. She or he would say, "Just wait."
Oh wow! Just adding to what you already had to deal with. So.
And of course, it got me to the point where I decided that instead of carrying my camera, I carried a .357 loaded in my briefcase, and would have shot one in a heartbeat if he'd come toward me or something, But
yeah,
but I missed probably one of the best shots I ever could have took. I was going to Rural Retreat on Route 11, where you go up and there's a crossroads, exit 90. Route 90 there. You know where that is?
Yeah. Like you're going towards the town of Rouge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I moved up there for a while, and I was going up the road and looked up. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. And there was a UFO shaped, like you had the old ones with a light on top and then that saucer on the bottom. I watched it for 30 seconds. Once again, no camera because I got a gun. I didn't think I needed to shoot at it or something. But it dropped down out of the clouds and sat there. Well, the clouds are nothing but wisp. I mean, they're not solid. You can't.
Right.
Well, I watched this thing, pulled off the road and watched it because broad daylight. It went right back up in the cloud and disappeared. And I'm going, what in the heck? I mean, it was like you took a light bulb and made the top and the bottom on it.
Oh, wow.
No place for it to go.
Where was your camera?
Camera's at home because I had a .357 in the briefcase.
You had the wrong gun that day, huh?
Yeah, because, I decided, because I was having black U.S. Navy 1 cars follow me. And they said they was here for some kind of research or whatever, but they were following me. So that's when I borrowed it, because I didn't have a .357. I borrowed one. Mm-hmm. And I would have used it if I had to, but I wouldn't have used reason to shoot at a light or a whiff, whatever it was. But those type of things really mess with my mind, because I was seeing things you shouldn't see. Mm-hmm. We was going to Radford one night, and I was taking my son's girlfriend home down there, and a flying box come along the road, an orange flying box, square. Of course, I didn't have no camera with me, but he and I looked at it. She looked at it. It's like a flying box.
Wow.
And boxes can't fly.
Right.
So every
but
time
they saw it too, not just you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
so wasn't your mind playing tricks on you at that point?
No. None of these things were. They were too real. I had something that was following me as I was coming from Rural Retreat to Wytheville on Route 11 one night. And I kept looking, you look out the windshield and I could just see the front of something. So I just pulled offside the road and looked up, and it was the B-2 bomber. Oh, wow. That shape, that size, driving 45 miles an hour.
Oh, wow. So,
I had to take a big deep breath because, and this was what was not occasional, it was often.
Right.
I followed a craft that had bright lights on it from Rural Retreat, the town of Rural Retreat, to Rural Retreat Lake, where Rural Retreat Lake doesn't have any lights and stuff that interferes, light pollution. And I went out to the edge of the lake, and there's a place where people can park and do whatever, but I stopped out there, and the lights started shining down on my car. So I got out, couldn't see nothing for lights, and it pretty well blinded me. Finally, this swoosh, it was gone. But I still had the problem with, it's called conjunctivitis of the eyes. It's an infection, and bright light will cause it.
Okay.
So from there until the next morning, I couldn't see nothing but smoke.
Oh, wow.
And I was going to my eye doctor the next morning to see what I could do, because you're trying to drive and you seen smoke.
Yeah.
And I went to bed, and I don't know if you ever heard of Edgar Casey. He was a sleeping prophet. He lived in Virginia Beach, and he would go into trances when people wrote him or called him about a health problem. Mm-hmm. And he, by remote, however he did it, he could tell them what was wrong. And they'd go to the doctor, and the doctor had found out he was right.
Oh, wow.
He's a guy that he used prophecy of his own that Virginia Beach was going to develop. This is long before they developed. And people bought land based on his prophecy, and now are millionaires, billionaires, because they bought up all along the boardwalk, which wasn't developed. Okay. Anyway, I read one of his books, and one of his books was that he believed that he could send the blood in his body into a area in his body and heal it. And he could do it for other people. And I've read several other books, and they paraphrased that. So while I was sleeping that night, I just concentrated on sending blood to my eyes. Mm-hmm. Now, this, you might think this is crazy. Next morning I woke up and I was perfectly fine.
Really? Wow.
The good Lord and whatever went along with that. But I mean, these are things that doesn't happen to people naturally.
Oh, no.
And so all this together, there were some days I actually thought maybe I'm going off the deep end. I mean,
well, I can see why. I mean, you're seeing stuff and all the time, people calling, telling you you're going to be killed, and you had all this going on. So, no doubt. Thank you for listening to Roots and Shadows, the Real Appalachia Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider following the podcast and leaving a review. It really does help others discover these Appalachian stories. Until next time, I'm Kevin Austin, and remember, every root tells a story, and every shadow hides one. As a reminder, these stories are drawn from public records, historical reporting, and conversations passed down through families, neighbors, and memories. Some names have been changed, and where the written record goes quiet, details have been carefully dramatized for storytelling.